Okay, here we go.
Stand up.
Hi, everybody. Today I wanted to take a moment to tell you kind of what's been going on with me that I haven't really spoken a lot about, at least not publicly. As a comedian, first on stage, then on the radio and social media, I've always been as transparent as I can be about my problems and my struggles because I learned that it helped others, and it's also formerly good material on stage and now good content and relatable here on the podcast. I mean, I'm keenly aware of the fact that now we're trying to at least normalize emotional struggle and anxiety and depression and all the rest of the struggles that we have, and that it can sometimes become kind of like a trauma porn. People constantly posting on Facebook or Instagram or wherever about their struggles that they are having. It becomes too much, and you're in a good mood and you go and see that, especially if it's someone that you care about, and it's hard. That being said, I do feel that I've mostly struck the right balance, sharing during my career in hopes that it helps folks learn and relate, and I like to offer solutions about what works for me and what works for so many others. As much as you have done that so often for me, people have really helped me out with any number of problems that I'm having in my life. As a stand-up comic, I took, my deepest insecurities and vulnerabilities on stage. I made fun of myself because I knew I wasn't the only guy losing his hair at a young age, or the smallest kid in school, or the myriad of issues that I struggled with throughout my life that everybody has in their life, that I identified them to get laughs, to connect. In the end, sharing these things made me feel more comfortable and more confident being me. I mean, I'm pretty hard to embarrass. It happens, but not very often. As a radio host, I learned how much more powerful it was when you had people listening to you every day. I talk about the struggles of parenting and loss, addiction, depression, anxiety, financial, relationship concerns that people have and had, and so much more. I connected with people listening in the most human of ways, and it's really been beautiful and helpful. And I'm very proud of it. So I'm hoping that what I decide to share today and every day will continue in that vein. Because after losing my dream gig, hosting a live radio show at SiriusXM, I learned the true beauty of the connection that we created there, because all of you showed up for me, and you continue to so often. I tried to uphold my end of the deal by working as hard as I can to learn how to produce this daily audio podcast that captured some of what the old show had, but many of you like this even better, and I'm so grateful that you do. And I've tried to make the show better and better and taken very little time off, rarely an entire week. I've also tried to show up by hosting the Hangouts now twice a week and keeping people connected to this amazing, magical community of thoughtful souls. And that's how I'm trying to kind of uphold my end of the deal, because you have all been so amazing and generous to me and my family. Since November 2019, we've built this beautiful community, and we've connected with each other, and we've contributed so much to the daily social fabric of many of our lives. And I learned this a long time before it became commonplace to share these types of things. And of course, people sometimes share too much, too often. So I've definitely tried to strike, I hope, the right balance or close to it over the years. And so I hope I don't ever become that person in your life. But the reason I say all of this is in hopes that I can be more transparent and credible with the struggles that I've had in order to help you with yours. I'm no expert, but I've tried to use my experiences and curiosity to have conversations with people who are experts in hopes of sharing their insights and expertise to help you with whatever bag of rocks, I think it was Nick DiFabrizio used that phrase, that you're carrying today or through your life. And so here it is. I haven't shared as much publicly since losing my gig at Sirius on the podcast, but most of that is because it was so very personal and mostly related to the struggles in my marriage. And I wasn't ready to talk about them. I didn't feel comfortable talking about them. But now Val and I agree that it's okay to talk more openly and publicly about it. And I don't want to say much other than Val and I have been separated now for about 3 years and living apart for almost 1. We had and still have a great, amazing relationship. We're so proud of all we created and contributed to the universe together, and we'll continue to do this in the next phase of our lives and our friendship. Our daughters are 17 and 20, and they're doing really, really well. I mean, we feel so fortunate to have both of them as our daughters, and we couldn't be prouder of them both and continue to maintain our connection as a family, but in another phase, a different phase, a new phase. For a long time, I felt, this time I'm talking about, that it was accurate to think and say that my marriage, quote, failed. but some really good, smart friends helped me understand instead that we succeeded in so many ways that we never imagined or dreamt of, and feel so fortunate for all we have had and continue to have. These past 4 to 5 years have been the hardest years of my life, but I want to be clear, I am not looking for any sympathy or sorrow with this message at all. I'm sharing all of this in hopes that I can do a lot more to help men especially who've gone through what I have around a similar age or time in their life. Some call it a midlife crisis or any number of other terms of reference to this adversity at this kind of time in your life, but I really try to look at it things like job loss, relationship changes, health issues, addiction, depression, anxiety. I like to look at them as transitions that are inevitable. Some people call them midlife crisis. I call it inevitable transitions, if you will. The reason that I say all of this in hopes that I can be more transparent and credible with the struggles that I've had in order to help you with yours. Again, I'm no expert, but I've tried to use my experiences and my curiosity of yours to have conversations with people in hopes of sharing their insights and expertise to help you with whatever bag of rocks you're carrying today and through life. So with that said, I'm looking forward to talking more about all of these different types of challenges that we may or may not face or know others who have. Oh, and I obviously just also want to say about Valerie Vendrami, who I met in the summer of 2000 while we were on a trip in Switzerland. We crossed paths, and who I had an amazing relationship with, that she is a wonderful, brilliant, tough, caring, thoughtful, curious, amazing mother and contributor to so many people's lives, making their lives better and healthier. And nobody more than our 2 daughters, who she's so close with and has been such an amazing mother to their entire lives from the very start. And I can't say enough about her and how grateful I have been to be by her side for all of those years. So just to say that, we continue to be close, good friends, and supporters, and in ways, partners. I'm happy that it has not gotten as ugly as I know so many other folks have, and I am super grateful to her for all of it. I guess that's about all I want to say about her. I want to keep it obviously private between her and I and our girls and closest friends. But I'm also really excited that talking about all of these things will help me bring on experts to talk about them, and I plan to focus on these types of issues, especially for men, more often, potentially creating a channel or an initiative or even writing a book about it all. So very happy to have Rachael Sloane joining us right now to get all of that started. For the first time on the show, the founder of Better Beyond Divorce, it's Rachael Sloane, who is a life coach who works specifically with separated and divorced men and has for the past 3 years. I discovered her at her YouTube channel, and it really helped me, and I know it will probably help a lot of other men, and as well as I think that women can learn a lot as well from this conversation and from Rachael's work because of the conversations that she has with men who are going through this transition, separation, or divorce. I hope that you'll check her out online at YouTube or RachelSloaneCoaching.com, and if you want to hire her or connect with her, that you will, because her work has been really helpful to me, and it might just be to you. So I had this conversation with her a little while ago, and I finally decided now is the time to share it with you guys, and I hope that you like it and take a lot from it, and that you'll reach out to Rachael Sloane and connect with her or recommend her to somebody that you know. I give her all of my credibility, whatever I have, because I watched a lot of these people and tried everything to deal with all of the challenges that take place in relationships and marriages and so on. And I really loved Rachael's work. So without further ado, my conversation with Rachael Sloane. And there she is now. Rachael, so happy to have you here. Thanks so much for agreeing to do this and join me. I'm really excited to introduce your work to everybody if they don't know it.
Yes. Oh, Pete, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor to be here with you today. I'm excited for it.
Do you do a lot of interviews like this?
Probably not as many as I should be doing. I really enjoy doing them. I can talk about this work for hours, so I'm really passionate about it. But I don't. I spend more time right now really talking to my clients and to my viewers. So I've done some, but not too many. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit, just before we get into your actual work, a little bit, whatever you want to share about your own professional background and how you ended up making these videos on YouTube, I guess about 4 years ago.
Yeah, my YouTube channel is, I think, about 4.5 years old, which is kind of crazy. My background in my training is as a life coach and an NLP practitioner, but I was not that for a long time. Before I was on, my intention originally was to be a veterinarian. I went to veterinary school in Colorado for a little while. But when I started this, I was actually in Colorado, had just moved there to open a restaurant with my husband. He's a restaurateur and we've had restaurants together in the past. And we were about to sign a lease and it was the spring of 2020 and all of the COVID stuff started happening. So we hit the brakes on that and we had a lot of time. And I had been working with a coach who was just phenomenal. It was changing my life. And I loved it and I couldn't get enough of it. And I was like, what am I going to do? What do I want to be doing? It's maybe not going to be restaurants for a long time. And so I went and I did my coach training and from the moment I started it, it's been such a passion to work with people in this way. I love it. So it's just really built and grown from there.
Let's just talk just about coaching in general and make fun of it for a second, because there's a lot of bad coaches. There's a lot of people out there who call themselves coaches who probably shouldn't be too close to coaching. And then people like to obviously differentiate between doctors and therapists and coaches and so on. I've already talked about how impressed I am with your work, and I think you'll prove it in our conversation. But what do you want to just say about just the general idea? Because there's a lot of bad therapy and coaches out there. And just tell me what you see as criticisms in general, and then we'll get specifically on the men stuff for sure. Yeah.
Well, coaching is just really unregulated, right? So you can just be a coach. Anybody can be a coach. And the crazy thing in the coaching world is there's a lot of coaches who become coaches just to coach other coaches. There's like a whole little pyramid in coaching, right? And so I find there's a lot of coaches who don't have a lot of experience actually coaching other humans, just other coaches. And all of that coaching coaches kind of leads to this like very insular little world. So I do think there's bad coaching out there. There's a lot of good coaching out there that gets missed because there's so much kind of bad marketing, bad coaching going on. But I think, what really hit me when I did my coach training, and I guess immediately afterwards, I started working with women whose partners or husbands had depression. And that's what had drawn me into coaching, was trying to cope with my husband's depression and support him and not get kind of pulled into that or react badly to it myself. And what I found that really surprised me and kind of scared me about coaching was that so many coaches out there are trying to help one group of people by villainizing another. There's a lot of coaching out there for women that is so focused on narcissism and emotional abuse and controlling and the patriarchy and how bad men are. And so I think that's one area where coaching has kind of, as an industry, has really failed in the sense that it's fallen away from the root of what coaching is supposed to be. It's meant to be a partnership where you and I sit down together, and I'm not your therapist and I am not leading you by my experience or what has happened to me. I'm just trying to help you understand what you're thinking, how you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what's best for you. And at the root of coaching is a trust that the client knows what's best for them, and that our job is to be a partner in helping them access that knowledge and that wisdom. But because there's all of this coaches coaching coaches, and they're like, coach from your own experience, you end up with a lot of coaches trying to lead people to make the same decisions that they made. And that's had a really negative impact on a lot of men, I think, as women access that kind of coaching.
Yes, I've seen that. I've read about it, and puts me in a peculiar position as someone who's most of my life and career focused on women and girls and advocacy and feminism, to then look at men more, certainly including my own experience, but trying to understand men and what we're dealing with. And what I noticed pretty quickly was that villainization. And I think that's a really important point, and I want to come back to it. But just back to your story. So you start studying depression and you're talking to this woman, but then at some point you started focusing on men. You're the divorce coach for men. Tell us how you got there.
Yeah, it was not my intention. I can tell you that, Pete. I hadn't coached any men in the beginning. I was just working with women. I was like, I understand how women think. I'm a woman. And you get all of that guidance when you first start coaching. It's coach what you know, coach what you know, coach your life experience. But I think it was through Facebook. A man had reached out to me and liked some of the stuff I was sharing and asked if he could do some sessions. And we only did maybe half a dozen sessions, but he was the most incredible client I had ever worked with. He was so ready to do the work. He wanted to unpack everything. He wanted to look at all the hard stuff. He wanted to understand it. And the stuff he had was really hard. He had a lot of trauma in his history, and he had been physically abusive in his marriage for a long time. So he had, since then I've talked to a lot of men who've internalized a lot of this narcissism talk, and they wonder, am I a bad person? Am I a monster? But when that man asked it, he had all this evidence. He's like, look at these horrible things that I've done. What's wrong with me? What's broken in me? And he let me in those sessions go in with him and just start to ask, who was he then? What was driving those kinds of behaviors? And what we found was that even there's a premise in NLP. So part of my training is neurolinguistic programming. And there's a premise in NLP that says behind every action, there's a positive intention, even our worst actions. And I loved that. I thought that it gives you such a pathway when you're trying to find the reason behind something. You can always keep looking. I didn't know if I'd find it with this man because these were horrible things that he had done. But even in that case, we did find the positive intentions. And really what we found was a lot of trauma and pain and a lot of ways that he was shutting down. But doing just those few sessions with him, it was so different than the clients I've been working with. He was just so ready to face himself. And he was so ready to become a better person through that. And the more that I started getting curious about men after that, I worked with a few other men and I saw that pattern again and again, like they want help to understand themselves and to change. And then as I was talking to them, I also started to realize how impacted they are by all of this villainizing content and language. And so it just hit me that there's such a need. And like you have this group of people that are so ready and so fun to work with, honestly, because they're so engaged in it. But not a lot of people are talking to them, at least not in an emotionally compassionate way.
That's what I found very resonating. That's what resonated with me, Rachel, in your work in a huge part, a lot of what you just said. But again, I want to get more specific, but I'm going to just press pause in the recording just because I think your mic is on something and when you either touch the desk or there's a wobble that I'm picking up when you're talking. Possible?
Yes, possible. How's that? Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Fine.
Okay.
I'm going to edit me saying.
I have to sit on my hands. I have a wobble in the desk that I need to fix.
I'm the same way. That's why I got all these special things to make sure anyway, cool. All right, I'm jumping back into it.
Okay.
But again, let me just, 4 years ago, you become the divorce coach for men and you've only, I'm sure, gotten better from having conversations with men. So again, just a little bit more on why you started focusing exclusively on men.
I had these couple of experiences. I liked working with men. I saw that there was a need. And, honestly, in the early days of coaching too, I was learning how to run an online business, which is something I've never done. So at the same time as I was trying to become a better coach, I was also trying to figure out how do I make this business work? Right. And one of the things that I kept hearing that's still great advice is, pick a focused niche. And I started looking at these men and I was like, I'm enjoying working with them. I'm learning a lot from working with them. And people, they're not being served. Like there's a market for it. So that was a piece of it. My husband and his business partner were a part of it too. When I started talking to them about some of the patterns I was seeing, they were like, oh my God, yes, no one's talking about these things. There needs to be more of a voice for men. And they were like, oh my gosh, I think this is going to be really meaningful. And so I decided I'm really going to focus on men. And then divorce came second. I knew I wanted to start working with men. And then I started trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I reach the men who are ready to work with me, who want to work with me? And what I found was that often it's men either trying to save a marriage or recover from a divorce. those were the ones that are in that place where they're really ready. And I think, maybe this is a rabbit hole on another side, but I think men are so conditioned to be tough and be strong and power through and fix things on their own that they often don't realize that they might want the kind of support I offer until things get really bad, till it blows up. I had one client the other day, he said, I feel like I'm learning to fly the plane after it's already crashing. But unfortunately, that's the case, I think, for a lot of men.
Say more about neuro-linguistic programming. I feel like when I watch your videos, I have these eureka moments because all of a sudden this person who I don't know is naming exactly what I am feeling or what I'm experiencing. It's like, how does she know what I'm feeling or experiencing? More importantly, though, really, the words that you use to describe feelings. And I feel like that has a little bit to do with our own programming, the way that we hear words and been taught ideas. Am I warm?
Yes, you're very warm. I would say it's a combination of two things. It's the neuro-linguistic programming. It's just a way of trying to understand how the human brain works and how individual human brains work. So it gets kind of a bad name. If you do a Google search on the internet for NLP, you'll get a lot of negative stuff because it's been used. It's kind of been, there's certain little hacks and tricks and ways you can say words that helps us access our subconscious mind and understand how it's working. And then people have taken that and obviously used it for marketing. And so there's a lot of, kind of negative connotations with it. But at its core, it's just if you and I sit down from an NLP perspective and I ask you what's going on, I'm not going to care about the story or the content of what's happening. I want to know how you're perceiving it on the inside. So when your ex-wife texts you, what are you seeing and hearing and feeling internally? And NLP just gives us some tools to start to explore that. We look at emotions and say, okay, well, how do you know you're feeling? If you're feeling sad, how do you know? What's happening in your body? What's happening in your brain? What are you hearing? And if you start to pay attention, it's kind of crazy how specific it is. You'll be having a thought, and if I ask you which side it comes from, you can tell me. Is it the right or the left? Is it the front or the back? How loud is that voice that's talking to you? Is it your voice? Is it somebody else's? So NLP it's been helpful for me, because I'm not a man. And I'm not divorced. Okay? And so when you say I'm on a video and I'm saying something that's in your head, it's because I've talked to other men and the NLP gives me the tools and the questions to ask to try to get a better understanding of what is their internal experience like. And that's, the main reason I can say those things on those videos is because so many men have been willing to share that with me.
Right. What is it with men nowadays? What are we dealing with? What are we struggling with and why? It's such a general, broad question, but I think about this all the time, talking to listeners and talking to friends between 40 and 60, middle-age crisis, marriage stuff, job stuff, work stuff, money, health, purpose, identity. It's all real, and it seems to start to pile up around a certain age. That's why they call it a midlife crisis, but it's such a cliche. There are so many jokes and excuses, and it's so easy to look at before you get there and say, that's never going to be me. And so easy to ignore while you're in it and never want to identify with it. But talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing with, I don't know if I should say American men of this era, men of a certain socioeconomic status. I don't know. Answer however you want, because I think it's general and we can drill down and be more specific, as you do with so many of your videos, obviously.
Yeah, it's an awesome question, Pete. I would say too, it's not just American men. It's not just men of any socioeconomic class. It's amazing the range of men from all over the world, all different social levels. I think what's going on, I will say maybe the one qualifier is the majority of the men I work with are, well, that's not even true. I was going to say most of the men I work with are white men and predominantly Christian white men, but that's not always true. I have a lot of exceptions to that, so maybe that's not quite a fair grouping either. But I think in general, what's happening to men
feel like there's a lack of resilience with certain white men of a socioeconomic status. And I know it's such a sweeping generalization. I'm talking about me and other people like me that have a hard time when they start to have a hard time because they never had a really hard time, which is not to say we didn't have adversity growing up, which is not to say we haven't had pain and anguish and suffering. It's just we haven't had this kind maybe and felt this kind of alone. We had support and so on. And I mean, that's, if I were to be more specific myself, that's the kind of a lot of that. I know you see a lot of that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be of a certain ethnicity or certain economics.
I'm going to challenge that belief because I think that's what a lot of people think.
Go.
Is that men in general, and especially men of a certain class or a certain race, have had it pretty easy. And then when things get hard, they don't have the skills to deal with it. That is not what I've seen.
Oh,
I don't think that's what's happening. I have been blown away by what the men I work with have survived. And I think what's happening to them is that they're from a very young age and then all through their adult lives, I think most men are being very conditioned to be a certain kind of human being. And they're taught things like their emotions aren't appropriate and often are not safe, like their anger is not safe and their grief is not appropriate or welcome. And there's even this kind of cultural narrative that men are simpler than women, that they have a simpler emotional experience than women do. And then on top of that, they're supposed to be strong. I did a live call last night and one guy was like, oh yeah, my dad just told me this morning, just suck it up. How many times nobody tells a woman that? You don't get told to suck it up because your puppy died or your husband left or your like when something happens to a woman, you get empathy. Men are told to suck it up, go out and get laid.
My friend's son was playing lacrosse, like 12 years old. And this is like a couple years ago. And the kid like clearly broke his finger and the dad said, suck it up. And the wife just like almost divorced him. And I just got in with the kind of joke / anecdote because it's like, it still happens to my generation of dads saying, again, almost exclusively to their sons, suck it up. And it's my finger's off.
It's bent over backwards. Yeah. Rub some dirt in it. Yeah, and it's everywhere. It's amazing to me now, having worked with men, to watch romantic comedies. Because that idea that the guy is like simple and not emotionally capable, and even that it's perfectly acceptable for a woman to smack him or tell him he's stupid in a relationship setting. I think that what's going on with men is that they're getting such a deep level of conditioning to be a certain kind of man, and then they're doing it. They're like stepping up and doing it and striving for it, and they're succeeding at it. And then they're finding out that what they were told they need to be isn't actually what people want from them. So they've gotten all this conditioning, but then the wife doesn't want you to be the guy who sucks it up and doesn't care that your kid's finger is broken. But that's what your dad taught you. Right? That's what the movies taught you. Right. And so I think men are in a lot of ways kind of being set up. They're being told this is who you're supposed to be. And they're saying, okay. And they're often sacrificing massively to do that, to be the provider, the protector, the rock. They're often sacrificing their own needs, their own emotional needs, and they're filling the role, the identity that they've been led to believe they're supposed to. And then they're being told that that's not right. And they're really, what I see is most men are really confused about the expectations of women, but also of kind of society and humans in general from them.
Oh man, I'm really happy to hear the pushback and a different interpretation of what I was saying. I think it's really helpful to hear that. But it sounds like you're talking a lot about cultural conditioning, and that it seems like none of us escape it because of many of the reasons you suggested, from films to now TikToks, these married people TikToks, which drive me nuts for a lot of hilarious reasons, but mainly because they're so scripted and forced. Yeah. But I also want to touch on one specific thing that I find very true of all types of men, and very much the case with me, because I think it opens up to a lot of other issues, which is men want to fix things that are broken right away. One of the issues I would always have, and I never could figure it out, is when my ex-wife would complain to me about something that happened during that day or anything at all. I would give her advice and give her answers. And at some point she would get frustrated and say, I can't talk to you. And I would be, I didn't know what that meant, but all she needed was for me to do what I learned as a parent from Dr. Chaim Ganat's Between Parent and Child. Just acknowledge and say, I hear you. That must have really been hard when your daughter, my complains. I never did that with her. I just tried to fix it. I wanted her to be happy. I wanted the problem to be over. She just needed me to listen. But that just fixing it, I think, went in so many different ways. Say a little bit about that cultural conditioning, which I think you just touched on, and how that animates almost everything else in a way.
Yeah, it is such a common, let's fix it. Let's fix it. How do I fix it? Men are not alone in this, but they do it more than women. And that dynamic is really present in so many of the relationships. So what I see is that all of us, we tend to relate to other people the same way we relate to ourselves. Right? So if we go back to that same childhood conditioning of suck it up, what does a man learn? He learns that when he feels something, he needs to ignore it and get on with it. Right? And so that's what he does with his own emotions. He feels pain, he feels fear, he feels anger, and he's, well, nobody cares. They're going to say, rub some dirt in it, suck it up, go back and finish the game. So he pushes it down and then he moves on. He's okay, well, what do we need to do? Let's take action. And because that's how he handles his own internal experience, that's also then the only way he knows how to deal with somebody else's emotions, right? She's coming to you and she's upset and she wants validation and comfort. But you don't know how to do that for yourself. Nobody ever taught you how to do that for yourself. All you know is, okay, well, there's nothing we can really do about the pain, but how can let's fix the solution so you don't get caused any more pain. Let's stop it at the source. And it seems, what I think a lot of men don't realize is that sounds so logical. It's, well, okay, there's a problem, let's fix the problem. But I don't think that behavior is actually coming from their logical brain. It's an emotion. It's because they're uncomfortable with her pain.
Yes.
Right? So men think, well, I'm just being logical and rational and trying to find the solution. What's really going on is, in this moment, the reality is she's upset and he's not comfortable being with that. And so he needs to change it, not just for her, but also so that then he doesn't have to be in that discomfort. And so I think it all comes back to that, lack of education around how to deal with their own feelings. And that's what in the flip side, that's what I see in the work I do. I spend a lot of time with my clients working on how do they deal with their emotions? What do you do when the overwhelming sadness or anxiety comes up? How do you handle it? And what I see is that when they learn how to do that effectively for themselves and they learn how to work with their own emotions, then I don't do much teaching on relationships and communication. They just start going on dates. And one of my clients said to me the other day, he said, "What's really cool? He's, I'm not scared about dating because I can read past the surface now. I can see what's going on." And he's, I feel like I can kind of cut through all the surface bullshit and see what it's really about because he understands what it's really about in himself. So I think that trying to fix it for her in a lot of ways is just an extension of how he's been taught to handle his own emotions.
So much of what I've heard you say is that one way or another, you come back to this, I feel like often, is that we aren't necessarily who our spouse said that we are. We aren't necessarily that. The words, the names, the qualities that someone who you're married to lays upon you, you aren't necessarily that. Now, I'm sure there's a grain of truth to every part of the way that you behave and even your character as to why your spouse might feel comfortable calling you those names or saying those things or, in arguments and so on. But they keep coming up. And then, you begin to believe that about yourself. And some of it is true, but some of it is the eye of the beholder. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are, given our own experience in life and so on. But that is a pretty normal conclusion if you're a self-aware person who wants to take a look at themselves to say, listen, I got to hear the criticism, what this person that cares about me and knows me is saying. And, it must be true, or he wouldn't say that. What is your advice? What do you say about that kind of conclusion that we come to after years of being with someone who says this and that about you? Maybe it's not necessarily true. Maybe it is. How do we know?
Yeah, this is such an important piece, Pete, because this is a darker topic, but the suicide rates for divorced men are really high. They're like 9 times higher than the average population. And from what I've seen in the conversations I've had, I think a lot of it is because of they've internalized what she said. When you've been married to somebody for 20 years or 40 years, A lot of men say to me, she's the person who knows me better than anyone else in the world. So if she thinks this is who I am, right, how do I know it's not? Sure seems like there might be something there. Especially, I guess it doesn't even matter if you're married or going through a divorce. If you're if she's saying these things in an argument, in any moment where she's angry or anxious, take it all with a grain of salt. Because there's a lot of changes that happen in the human brain when we go into a fight or flight response. And so anytime you're arguing or there's a conflict happening, she is likely to be in fight or flight, and you are too. It distorts our judgment. It makes our brain, one of the big effects is it makes the brain hyper-focused on the problem, whatever we perceive to be the threat, which makes sense, right? Because if a lion is about to eat me, I shouldn't be thinking about my laundry. I should be thinking about the lion. But it also filters out all of the other stuff, and we lose the ability to see the bigger picture. And one of the really confusing points a lot of the men I work with experience is that she'll say all of those mean things, call him all of those names, and then she'll be nice, or she'll say something loving or sweet, and or she'll say she misses him, and he's like, how can she call me these things and then say that she misses me? Who am I? Who is she? And it starts to get really confusing. The difference is that when she's not in fight or flight, she can see more of you. She can see all these other sides of you. When she's in fight or flight, she can only see the negative behaviors. And I'm going to say behaviors really specifically because it's not even the negative character or the negative traits in you. It's the negative behaviors you've engaged in. And those are different from who you are. So that's one piece of it, is that a lot of what she's saying is said in fight or flight, and that's not even what she really believes. But the other piece, yes, there's an element of truth around the behaviors.
Yeah.
A lot of men do act in ways that are perceived as controlling, for example, although it can often be the other way. But what I encourage my clients to do is to, instead of asking, is she right about who I am, which leads to despair and overwhelm and a lot of pain, start asking, is she right about the way I've behaved? And we can start to look at what are the cycles that I've learned to operate within in my relationships. Right? How do I react to conflict? She's calling you controlling. Okay, let's set that aside. Some of that is her state. You're not a controlling person at your core. That's not an aspect of your identity. Have you behaved in a controlling way? How do you react to conflict? When you're in fight or flight, what's your default mode? Do you yell? Do you withdraw and shut down? How do you handle it when you feel like you're losing her? When you feel like you're being abandoned or rejected? What's the default reaction? What's your cycle of giving and receiving love? What did you learn growing up about giving and receiving love? And you can start to look at what are the relationship cycles and the communication cycles that I've been operating from. And often what she's saying can give you clues as to what patterns of behavior you've been in. But those don't have anything to do with who you are. Is that answering that question, Pete?
Absolutely. I mean, I wait for a long time, longer than I normally would with a guest when you're talking, because I'm like, you can keep going if you want to give more examples, because it is really right on. And it's exactly what I wanted you to say, what I wanted to hear you say, the difference between how you're behaving and who you are, because man, can you get caught up in the who you are part of it, and men end up very broken at the, in a divorce, in a separation, and have, as well as anybody, because you talk to so many, a really difficult time recovering, finding love again, dating, any of it. It's very hard because you think all kinds of things about yourself that might have been behaviors, but not necessarily who you are. So let's just talk about a couple of those things, those words that we hear so much. I want to drill down a little bit on things like narcissism and gaslighting and controlling and all of these kind of issues that certainly get attributed more to men, and why, yes, again, some of them are true, and maybe these labels maybe they're entirely true, but what does that mean? I mean, you gave us at the beginning a great example of a man who was literally physically abusive. It doesn't get too much worse than that. And so Is he broken beyond repair? Is he irredeemable? Does he have another shot at happiness, at love? So talk a little bit about those words, and I think the injustice that they do and how popular they have become, because they really seem to be holding back not only men from recovering, I would argue women from allowing themselves to be in a relationship with a man again.
Yeah. Oh, it's, I really think this is so much the algorithms and the advertising, because fear-based content keeps you watching. Right? And the natural response when you're going through something like this is, well, who's the asshole in this situation? Is it her? Is it me? Who's the bad guy? And so there's just so much out there. Yeah. Even narcissism. I talked to a psychiatrist who used to work with narcissists, and he was like, yes, narcissists exist. He said, there are not nearly as many as you think. And he said that there was some study that showed that asking somebody if they're a narcissist was just as accurate a test as running them through like their whole standard test that he was doing in his psychiatric practice. He said, if somebody's a narcissist, they'll just tell you they are. They don't care. It doesn't bother them. They're not upset about it.
Interesting.
So if you ask somebody, do you think you're a narcissist? And they say yes, they probably are. He said, people are usually right about that. Which means,
fear-based content keeps you watching, but it also creates credibility, unfortunately, meaning if millions of people are watching this narcissist video, they all must be having similar experiences, coming to similar conclusions, and this is it. This is where I need to be. Meanwhile, Rachel over here has 25,000 subscribers. She's just started 4 years ago, and hopefully she catches up with that person, but she probably never will. I won't catch up with Alex Jones. But that doesn't signal a lack of credibility. In fact, your nuanced approach, specific approach, really thoughtful approach, and credibility and experience is far more helpful and interesting than any of that nonsense that's out there. So I just wanted to kind of back that up in terms of the credibility of it all. But that is the stuff that's out there. And talk more about the damage that the popularity of these buzzwords, what do you call them, feelings does, the damage.
Well, they damage everybody, and men fall into this too. I have a lot of clients who think their wives are narcissists, or they'll use the words gaslighting, gray rocking. Men also fall into the whole MGTOW red pill kind of, which is the flip side, that modern women aren't capable of love or commitment. But anytime we get into these labels, we are keeping ourselves trapped. It hurts on both sides. So men are hearing this from women that they love and respect and who they've raised children with and shared a life with. She's putting this label on and saying, you are a narcissist. This is who you are. Their brain is hearing that and saying, oh my gosh, this is who I am. And when we take something on as an identity, we tend to give up. Well, it's just who I am. It's just who I am. I have no control of it. I can't change it. And for the woman, it damages her too, because now she lives in a world where there's all these narcissists out there. And so every man she meets, she's like on hyper alert. Where are the red flags? What's wrong with her? Right. And men do this too. They start dating after divorce and they're like, oh my gosh, I have to make sure she's not like crazy in the way my wife was crazy, or that she's not a narcissist, or that she's right. And so then we're always on the lookout for these like bad people, and they don't really exist. There's narcissistic behaviors. Right? And there are narcissistic traits, and there are people who will tell you they are a narcissist and they take it to the extreme. But at the root of all of it, whether it's gaslighting or controlling behaviors or a woman being cold and pulling away, they're all just our strategies. It's the strategy. It's how we learned how to function in relationships. It's how we learned how to give and receive love. It's how we learned how to stay safe. It's how we learned how to defend ourselves. And we're just acting out these strategies, and humans can learn new strategies. Right? Our brains are incredibly plastic and capable of learning new things. But when we attach our identity to it, we're trapped. And that's what I see happening from all these buzzwords, is they're keeping men trapped, feeling like they're bad guys. They're doing a terrible amount of damage to men's self-esteem and self-confidence. And they're keeping women terrified of men. And everyone's a victim in that scenario.
You don't mention the kids. I mean, if you call your spouse a name, or you say he is and your kids hear that, they then assume that it's correct. And it's so minimizing to the person's, like, my parent is calling my other parent abusive, or a narcissist or any of these, other things, or even an addict. And it's just, maybe you are those things, maybe you aren't. But these words are so limiting, and they create, as we've already kind of talked about, this identity and this attachment to an identity that you can never break, is what I'm hearing. It's very hard to break until they realize that it can be done, which is, a lot of what your work is, what I've learned. And this is how you do it.
Yeah. And it also keeps us from, I think, on a bigger cultural level, from being able to solve any problems. Because when you are a narcissist, it's just, that's it. And it's like we're saying the narcissism is the problem, or the addiction is the problem, or the depression is the problem. But none of those things are the problem. They're all symptoms of what's happened to you and how you got through it. And if we can start to look at those things, we can change all of the symptoms. And this is, I think, bigger even than just the mental health piece. We're very symptom focused. Even in our medicine, we tend to focus more on the symptom than the root cause. But the impact on kids, I think what people forget about their kids too, Pete, is that, my parents got divorced, and I still remember, it still happens to me sometimes. I'll say something, or especially as I get older, I'll look in the mirror and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I look just like my mom. Or I was like, wow, that sounds just like my dad. And as soon as I see them and myself, I also feel the judgment of the other parent. So if I see my dad and me, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to be, because he's this label. And so, like, when you accuse your spouse of being a narcissist, someday your kid is going to grow up and look in the mirror and see dad. And then that narcissism label is going to be there. And that self-doubt is planted.
My dad is 80. And when people see us together, they don't know who's older. It's really sad for me, but
good for you as you age, right? Like, you're going to grow into those genes of longevity.
I guess. So getting back to, I want to go back to men who, a lot of times I think if you end up talking to someone like you, watching your videos, you want help. Obviously, you're literally searching for help. And I'm so glad I found your work. I mean, I watched all kinds of videos and people, and, you're desperate. You're going on YouTube. I've tried all kinds of therapy, and I have lots of good things to say about it. But often, you don't get the best therapist, or it's, really expensive, or whatever you want to say about it. But when they get to you, they want help. But a lot of us are broken in all kinds of different ways when they get to you. You mentioned, someone who's physically abusive. How do you look at somebody who admits he's self-aware and he knows that he's done bad things and had bad behavior and has bad habits, and he wants to fix them, but he's so beaten down and doesn't think that he can change? Where do you start with a guy like that who admits to terrible behaviors, maybe, continued terrible behaviors, wasn't just one time? That guy deserves dignity. He deserves a chance. Like, how do you help him?
Yeah. So what I start with, when somebody really, they want to believe, but they don't, like, they're not sure that they can heal, where I always start is I try to help them have a felt sense experience of, it's a little hard to describe. I try to help them feel a connection to themselves that's loving, compassionate, friendly. And so that's maybe a little bit vague, but what it looks like is, first, I help them get out of their head. We really can't heal these things in the logical brain. We've got to get into the limbic brain. It has to be, I meet so many men who they understand very well what's going on. They read the psychology. They've watched all the videos. Like, they get it, but they're like, well, I understand I need to let go and move forward, but I just wake up every morning hoping she's going to call and come back. There's a disconnect between what he feels and what he knows. Or I know it's possible to heal and I've seen X, Y, and Z, but I just feel like I'm a horrible person. I just feel like I'm not enough. Right. And so we can't stay up in that cognitive space. So when I get a guy who doesn't believe it, what I help him do is get into his body and start becoming aware of what he's feeling. And I help him connect to his emotions differently. And often, if somebody's really stuck, the most powerful thing that I have found is if you can take somebody back to a childhood experience where some of these behaviors originated. Like, where did you learn to withdraw and shut down in conflict? Where did you learn to lash out in anger? When people can go back and see that from the outside as an adult, their childhood experience, it's much easier for them to have compassion for the person they used to be. And so when people are really stuck in that self-doubt, self-loathing, often what I'll do is help them connect to the origins of it, but it has to be an emotionally engaged connection, which is a little bit hard to put words to.
But you do such a good job at it just then, and even better when you're talking specifically to specific people. One thing I've struggled with, and I didn't want to share too much about myself here, talk with you privately, and I talk with people obviously privately, but I definitely want to say that I think, and I've been told this a lot, that I definitely am hard on myself. When I know that I've screwed up, said the wrong thing, done the wrong thing, displayed bad behavior in any way, I can go into a spiral. I've learned a lot about compassion and having compassion for myself. But I mean, when I say I've learned about it, I've read it. I cognitively know what it is, but I don't think I apply it very much. I'm not very forgiving for myself. Instead, I really catastrophize. I beat myself up. I say terrible things to myself and words to myself. I listen to the wrong wolf is what I say. I like that parable about listen to the right one. So tell me a little bit about how common that is and what kind of things you're hearing when I say that, and what you would say to someone who does that, that realizes they've done something wrong and just comes undone over it.
Yeah. So I love the wolf parable too, but I find most men take it too far. They focus on trying to feed the right wolf.
Yeah.
And we have to build a relationship with the bad wolf. If we don't know what it's doing or why it's there, and we just try to plow over it and fix it with the positive stuff, like, it's in you. It's not going away. Obviously, you understand all this, but it's still happening. So what I would ask you, Pete, or another man who's having that same experience, I would start with two questions. One would be, what is it doing for you? That self-criticism. How is it helping you? And even if it's not helping you, how's it trying to help you? What's it trying to do for you?
It creates proper shame so that I don't display that behavior again.
Yeah, it's trying to fix you, right? Just like you would be trying to fix your spouse. Well, it's there so that you don't make the same mistake again, right? And so we can go even a level deeper with that, is what does it want for you? Through that, if it succeeds, if it can shame you enough that you don't mess up again, what do you get? What's the positive desired outcome?
A healthier relationship, more consistency in my relationship. I'm actually even thinking about a criticism of my daughter. The worst thing I ever got was one time when she said something equivalent to, I hate you. She didn't say that, but it was something like that. It was a real harsh criticism of me as her father. And I went bonkers down the drain. I remember I ran into my shed and I cried. And I reached out to my brother, and I was saying all kinds of bad things. And, he called my ex-wife, and she had to come check on it. That was the worst. And I, share that example because of, I don't know why I started saying that. What was your question? That was the worst.
Yeah. I also, a side note, I think so many women don't have any idea how deeply men feel words like that. Whether it's from, like, your daughter probably didn't see that happen.
No, I don't think she did. She wouldn't.
Right? Yeah, she doesn't know it was like that. But so that's just for any women who listen to this. I hope that they catch that men are feeling these things, even if they're not showing them. But so, Pete, what you just did is you identified a really noble and really important intention. All that internal criticism wants you to have a better relationship with your daughter. Right? That's what it's about. That's the intention. So we have, with anything that we're doing, anything our brain's doing, there's an intention and then there's a strategy. The intention is better relationships. The strategy is shame Pete till he wants to kill himself. Yep. The strategy might not be actually helping you achieve the goal. So then the second, in this case.
How diplomatic.
But at some point it did. So I want to ask you, Pete, and we can either go with a hypothetical example or if you want to look at it for yourself. Where or when or how did you learn to shame yourself, to judge yourself so you wouldn't mess up?
I don't know. I would love to have the answer to that because, as you said earlier, that's the root. I don't know. I don't know if it was when I was growing up or if it was in my relationships, or I don't know. What do people say?
That would be like, if you wanted, a lot of people don't. No, it often takes some exploration.
Sure.
And that would be the next step then, Pete, is to sit down, maybe do some journaling and look back. Did one of your parents model that? Is that how they handled their own mistakes? Is that how they handled your mistakes? Did a lot of kids, I think, learn this kind of self-criticism, self-judgment in school with all the red ink all over their papers? But there might also have been some more kind of concrete instances. And often these strategies that our brains are using in our relationships were formed when we were really young. And the strategy you form when you're 4 years old or 7 years old is like the best you can do at that point. Like your brain's not that developed. You don't have all this experience, right? So whatever's going on, you're getting in trouble, you're making mistakes. And as a child, the stakes are really high because if you mess up and you're punished, the relationship is often taken away from you, right? You're put in timeout. You're not allowed to rejoin the family or be at the dinner table or whatever it is. And for children to be not in relationship with adults is really dangerous because they're dependent on adults for survival. So if the adults are mad at me, there's a real safety issue for children. And so often children will figure out ways to avoid making mistakes and their brains will be pretty intense about it. It'll be like, Pete, it's not safe for you to mess up again. You better get this right. And we can get this really strict inner critic, but it's actually out of this self-preservation. It's trying to make sure that you don't mess up so that you don't lose the relationship so that you stay safe.
I think for me now, obviously you've made me think about it and I do want to try to answer and are probably somewhere close to it, but I think it was less about messing up and more about wanting to impress people and be liked and, you know, the center of attention. And if I wasn't getting that kind of approval, then I wasn't enough or I wasn't important in the room and the role and the relationship and the family or something. And I think the converse of that leads to when I mess up. Does that make sense at all? Or is that not it?
Yeah. No, I think you might be onto it. And you could probably take it even a level deeper, Pete, and start to ask, okay, where did I learn that if I made mistakes, I wouldn't get the attention, the love, the connection that I needed? Okay. So somewhere along the way, the brain went, love is conditional, basically. Relationships are conditional, right? You learn that lesson. And it was like, well, be careful. You have to be a certain way to get the attention, to get the affection, to get the love, right? So for you, the inner critic might be about that, saying, well, I have this need to be connected to other people. That doesn't just come for free. Got to show up a certain way. And so you could start to unpack that and look back and say, okay, well, how did child Pete learn that? And often what happens when we go back and look at it from trying to find the origin is we start to have compassion because you were probably 5 or 6 or 10 or 12. And imagine your daughter when she was 7 years old, right? If she felt like she had to do something to fit in and she, learns to judge herself into that, you wouldn't be upset with her for that. You'd have so much empathy and compassion for her. And
you better perform.
You need to be. Yeah.
No, it's great. I love when you really, I'm sure for me, again, I was the tiniest in every room. I'm sure it had to be, everything to me goes back to the root of being the smallest boy in the room all the way through my senior year. Hence my, working on my personality to get attention and as a defense mechanism, comedy and humor and all of that. But I like when you talk about your own kids, my own daughter, and how she I never thought about it that way. Before I, have to let you go, I've got to get to these 2 other ideas or issues, which of course you I think a lot about and talk a lot about when it comes to marriage, especially when it comes to separation and divorce, attachment and codependency. Those are other buzzwords, therapy words, psychology words that I hear a lot about and haven't always understood or unpacked, but I've definitely tried to and started to. I mean, you don't have to be with another person, I found out. Like being alone is actually okay, even though no one told me that. And I'm good at being with people. I love people and I love partnership and I like being in a relationship, but I never even considered that being alone was okay. And I'm needy. I need to be with somebody. Living alone has been really hard for me for some of the most obvious and I guess surprising reasons, but I am a mess, Rachel. I'm like 12 in here. It is a wreck. I can't do fundamental things. And, all of the responsibilities that she had, we had a lot of equitable responsibilities, but I now have to perform them, the bill paying, the cleaning, and everything that she did. Now I have to do, and I'm terrible at it. I'm getting better. And I'm working on it, but therein lies, I think, a lot of the codependency and a lot of the issues around attachment that I don't even think I've begun to understand that stuff.
I mean, I think just named it spot on. You said it's like I'm 12 in here.
Look around. I mean, you should see the Spider-Man poster. Some of it's good.
Well, it's good. Some of the 12 is great, right? But that's the essence of attachment and codependency. Right? Like we could get into what are the different styles and all of that. And some of that's helpful. I find a lot of men, they learn about those cycles and they're able to recognize some of it and it helps them understand the origins. But I always caution them, like, don't get too attached to those labels. Like you're not anxiously attached. That's maybe a pattern. It's maybe a cycle you've been participating in, you've been stuck in, but it's no more part of your identity than you are a narcissist. It's just a pattern. And so like when you say you're 12, that's exactly what these attachment patterns are. Like what's supposed to happen in an ideal human development scenario is that when you're a child, there's always a compassionate, emotionally attuned adult around. And so it's safe for you to go out in the world and try to learn to walk and fall down and hurt your knee because there's somebody there to pick you up and comfort you and let you know it's okay. And then you feel safe enough to go back out and try again, and you can fail and you can fall, but there's always somebody kind of there to catch you and support you.
Not always, but most of the time for most kids.
Most of the time. Yep. Yeah. The hope is in this ideal scenario that happens. And then as you become an adult, as you go through puberty, you start to go further and become independent. And because you've had that support, you learn how to do that for yourself. So before your mom was like, oh, it's okay. You fell down and hurt your knee. You can go back out. Now around 12, 13, you're learning, I don't actually need mom to tell me that. I can tell myself that, right? Because I know it's okay. And so we start to learn to give ourselves the validation and support, and then we can move forward in our lives. But that doesn't happen for most of us. Most of us don't get that enough from the adults in our lives. And so we hit 12 and we don't know how to give it to ourselves. And we're not actually sure it's true. We're not sure that if I fall down and hurt myself, that it's going to be okay. Because sometimes in the past it wasn't okay and there wasn't anybody there. And it was really scary and I felt really alone. Okay, so a part of our brain almost doesn't get to finish that development into I can give myself this certainty and support. And that's where those insecure attachment styles come. And we are looking then outside of ourselves in our relationships for somebody to give us that comfort and reassurance. And healing that is just a process of growing it up for yourself, learning what you didn't learn at 12. How do I give myself that support, that resilience, that encouragement?
And you spell out, I don't know that I'm even doing justice with your work and your videos because you're very specific and you drill down specifically into so many of these issues on your videos. Why you can't let go. Why do depressed partners push you away? Divorce recovery for men, why it's so hard, how to effectively support a depressed partner, how to finally let your wife go. I mean, you really get specific, and the videos are not long. I highly recommend people watch them, but there's so much more too. I mean, you've learned so much from your clients, from the men that you talk to, because you hold these live YouTube lives and you also obviously do one-on-ones. Talk to me a little bit about what you feel here on a kind of a positive note, what your work has taught men and done for men, because I think the bottom line that I would land in, and I still do, that I'm not going to be happy again. I'll never be happy again. I won't find love again. All kinds of absolutes that I think we end up at, which again, that's a story that you're telling yourself and it's temporary and it's not true. But talk to me about many of the happy endings and the new beginnings that you've helped men achieve through your work.
Yeah. So when you said that, I was like, oh, Pete, you need to come join the BBD community and talk to some of these guys.
I hope that a lot of, listeners will as well. I mean, I've been trying to, as I told you before, work on creating community for men going through this stuff. You have created that community, and so people should check it out, but go ahead.
Yeah. So just the other day, there's so many cool ones. This is my favorite part of this work because there's a lot of pain in divorce, but then I get to see the outcomes. And like you just said, I would still say I'm never going to be happy again. There was a fellow who started my program, maybe almost a year ago now, about 8 months ago. And that's what he said to me. He's, look, Rachel, I'm going to survive this divorce. I've got kids. I'm going to be there for them. I'm going to get through it, but I'm not going to be happy again. I'm not going to be in love again. And I'm never going to find a woman like my ex-wife again. And he was just kind of resigned to it. And he just posted the other day, and I hadn't heard from him for a while. And he was like, every year on my birthday, I go back through the last year and do kind of a check-in, like, where was I? Where am I now? And he was like, a year ago, I never would have thought this would happen, but I'm in this relationship with this passionate woman, and she's crazy about me and I'm crazy about her, and we're seeing where it goes. And I just never thought that was possible. So I see a lot of that in relationships. But that's not my favorite outcome. The one that I love and that I've been getting to see a lot of lately is I see men teaching this to their kids. And it's so cool to see. I had a guy I think 2 days ago on Monday, he was telling me he does one of my NLP visualizations at night, every night with his 10 and 11-year-old daughters. And he love it. And they like know it word for word. And they do these exercises with him. Or another man was in his second divorce, and his adult daughter really hadn't spoken to him much since his first one, like 10 years before. And she reached out and wanted to talk to him. And he was able to sit down with her, and we sat on the couch for 6 hours. And I just started asking her how she was feeling and asking some of the same kinds of questions that I've asked him or that he's worked through in the program. And she started telling him about like how the divorce impacted her and how she felt abandoned and how hard it was. And he was able to not fix it. He was able to just be with her and give her, like you were talking about earlier, Pete, that validation and be present. And her boyfriend had proposed, and she was scared to get married, in part because of what she had seen her parents go through. And after she and her dad were able to sit down and really reconcile their relationship, she did end up going through with it and getting married and invited her dad to the wedding. And so when men learn, because I'm just teaching awareness and some strategies. And then it's a lot of work, I'll be honest, to go back and unpack your childhood and break down all these cycles and break through them and change them. It's not easy, and it takes a lot of courage. But then when they do it, the people who benefit most are their kids, because they just start to pass all of that down. So that's my favorite part.
I love that. That's a great one. It's a great example. All right. Well, I hope we can do this again. And I'd love to obviously invite you to our gatherings, but I really hope people will go look up your work, and we'll keep in touch. Rachel, I cannot thank you enough for what you've done for me, for watching your videos, and for joining me today. Thank you so much. Keep up the amazing work.
Thank you so much for having me, Pete. It's been just such an honor to be on here with you.
Well, there you go, Rachael Sloane. Go look her up at RachelSloaneCoaching.com and follow her on YouTube. I'm sure I will have her back and continue the conversation. Very much look forward to your feedback on this conversation. So please reach out to me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and let me know what you thought about it. And I will talk to you right here tomorrow. Cannot do this without your support. So thank you so much for being here, supporting me through all of it.
Boy, you better stand up. When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up.